Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? How's everyone doing? Good? Great to see you all here. Thank you so much for coming, and welcome everyone to our first annual Leadership for Social Change lecture. My name is Ralph. I'm the Assistant Director for Leadership Programs and Student Development, and the Office of Student Development is pleased to present this afternoon's program. If you're interested in taking action after listening to Jim's presentation today, numerous student organizations, including Business Without Borders and our Catholic Relief Services chapter, will be distributing information in the foyer of the Villanova room upon exiting the presentation. Likewise, please make a note on your evaluation sheets, and we will be sure to forward additional information onto you as well. As you can tell, I don't want this to be a lecture just for lecture's sake. I hope there's a spark that provokes you to go out and create change after listening to the presentation today. Jim Keati is a nationally renowned educator and speaker in the area of social justice. Jim has spoken across the United States and at international venues to thousands of interested audience members. He has been sought out by members of the U.S. Congress, as well as university administrators, religious and union leaders, and student groups, to offer his personal and professional experience and critiques on the issues of sweatshops, globalization, and social justice. For those of you that don't know Jim's story, he was a soccer coach with the St. John's University Red Storm, the men's NCAA Division I national champions, when he stood up against Nike in their sweatshops, and it cost him his job. Since then, he has made ending sweatshop labor his life mission. Many people ask the question, what is it like to live on a sweatshop wage in a developing country? Jim Keati found out. He spent 1 month in an Indonesian factory worker slum, living on $1.25 a day. That's $1.25 a day. A typical wage paid to Nike's subcontracted workers. Today he will share his personal stories of living with factory workers, and he will provide provocative analysis and clear direction on how we can get involved in the fight to stop sweatshops. Please silence your cell phones if you haven't done so already. And please join me in welcoming Mr. Jim Keati to Villanova University.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you. Before I get started with my talk, let me get this out of the way early. I am a graduate of St. Joseph's University. I am a Hawk. It is bittersweet for me to be here in front of a Villanova crowd. If you could, again, double check your cell phones, make sure they're on silent or vibrate, but keep them close by because we will use them later on in the presentation. At like the age of 18, I was just on the track. Go to a good college, get a decent degree, do good. You're going to get an entry-level job down on Wall Street. You're going to work real hard. You're going to be a broker. You're going to make tons of money. You're going to be retired by a very young age. You're going to have a house on the beach in New Jersey and a couple Mercedes and a trophy wife, and that'll be the end of the game. I'm done. Multi-millionaire. That's it. I was playing professionally for the New Jersey Imperials. I was playing the best soccer of my life. I get offered this coaching job by one of my teammates to go coach at St. John's University, the NCAA Division I national champions. They're the best team in the country. I was having a blast. I was loving coaching. I was loving playing. I'm living in New York. I'm also studying stuff that I really enjoy. I'm digging into like studying theology for the first time in my life in a formal way. I get online, I start doing searches about Nike and sweatshops and labor practices. And what I found was if you wanted to pick a company that completely violates everything that Catholic social teaching is about, Nike would be your perfect case study. And at the same time I'm doing this research, St. John's University Athletic Department starts to negotiate a $3.5 million endorsement deal with Nike that would require me as a coach to wear and promote the products. St. John's University got the largest Catholic institution in the country, coupling itself with the largest sportswear company in the world, And I said, how can we, as such a public symbol of Catholicism, do something that runs completely counter to our mission? Like, we're saying to the world then, look, you should care about the poor, and we should fight against injustice, and we should seek out the causes of poverty. Well, unless you're getting like some really good athletic equipment and $3.5 million along with it. I mean, you want to talk about just hypocrisy manifested in the real world. Like, this was it.
And you have the story at St. John's.
Jim Keati has caused a massive pileup.
He is clearly an idealist.
I didn't go to St. John's University to work for Nike. I went there to coach and to study theology.
Keati, a devout Catholic, protested.
How does he reach the point where he thinks it's immoral to wear the swoosh?
Because he's coming at it from a background of faith and religion. This isn't about just money or power or job or anything. Think about this. How many of us on a job that we really want are prepared to get a memo from the boss saying, stop doing this or you're out, and you keep doing it?
I was given an ultimatum by my head coach: wear Nike and drop this issue or resign. End of story. So in June of 1998, I was constructively fired. People were telling me, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, those are great jobs and you can live like a king or a queen on those wages, and those people are really happy to have those jobs. I want to go find out. Doesn't everybody just want to know the truth? So I wanted to know the truth firsthand. I wanted to see it, I wanted to smell it, I wanted to hold it in my hand. I knew I was going to need other people. Leslie was a natural match.
Jim and I went to college together. We came together ultimately because we share an interest in labor rights issues.
I eventually met back up with her a few years after school through an email about sweatshops.
I really wanted to be working with these issues.
And I wrote to my buddy and said, you know, who's this woman that's writing to you about this stuff? And he said, oh, she's nuts like you know, you should email her. And she was actually en route to go work with Mother Teresa's sisters in India. And I sent her off this email, hey, I got this great idea, let's go starve on Nike's wages in Indonesia.
And so he's like, I really need to go.
And she wrote me back, sounds great.
Let's go.
We plopped down in Tangerang, Indonesia, this industrial suburb outside of the capital of Jakarta, with the plans that for the next month we were going to live as Nike's factory workers lived, which meant that we were going to go live in a workers' slum outside of the capital. And we were going to live on the workers' wages, $1.25 a day for the next month, to try and come maybe to a better understanding of what it's like for Nike factory workers to make this kind of money and live under these conditions. We lived in a 9x9 cement box. It was over 100 degrees, it's 100% humidity, a small window, certainly no air conditioning.
No furniture. You slept on a very thin mat on an uneven cement floor covered in shelf paper.
The streets outside of your home are lined by open sewers, and what that means, like in the rainy season, you would have all that feces just float up into the streets and into your house.
And every time that you go to the bathroom, it comes back out into the sewer for everybody else to see and smell.
You would have football-sized rats that would stampede over the ceiling at night and come up through the toilet and look for stuff to eat in the house, or the fist-sized cockroaches that would crawl over you at night.
Siapa nama Anda?
Saya.
Daya. Nama Jim.
Nama Jim ya.
Yeah.
Just like anyone around the world, you can't just drop into someone's life and be like, hi, we're here, we want to live in your life and tell us how much it sucks. You had to build bonds of trust.
Jim. Siri. Yenny. Nice to meet you. Hello.
They treated us very politely, and it wasn't until they saw that we were committed in the capacity of living on the wages that they're forced to live on, in the conditions that they are living in, that they felt that they could start to begin to trust us. You get to know them, and you hold their children, and you eat with them, and you share stories with them. They become part of your family.
We would go to different workers' homes. You got like 4 women sleeping in like an 8x8 cement box, and all their possessions are in there, like everything. in this small area.
The workers would have to share a bathroom with 5 to 10 other families. The workers would have to share living quarters, actually like a row of shacks with corrugated tin roofs. All of those families would share a laundry corner and a kitchen facility, and they would all share the same well to take the water out of.
$1.25 a day after you've paid for your rent, water, electricity, any major transportation costs, you're going to be left on average with roughly 7,000 rupiah per day. What the hell does that mean? That's going to buy you 2 simple meals of rice and vegetables, a bag of peanuts, a bottle of iced tea, and some dish detergent. And that's all you can get. And that's your reward?
Without a doubt. We found it out in the first week that we were there. There's no way that you can live on $1.25 a day and maintain your human dignity. It's just not possible.
I lost 25 pounds living on Nike's wages in Indonesia. I spent the month painfully hungry and tired and like near the point of exhaustion most days.
I just felt my energy storage was just depleted, and I just started going downhill fast, and I just started getting sick every day.
And she got very sick one day. She had like a fever of like 104, and she's got to deal with, well, I have a fever of 104, I can buy aspirin and like a little drink box to get some vitamin C, but if I buy those 2 things, I don't eat for the rest of the day.
I don't know what this is gonna do. Because we're gonna go home, we're gonna say, like, this is not enough money, and no one's gonna do a damn thing different.
How do you feel like a human being? How do you feel like your work, your gifts? You know, for them and the workers that I've talked to the last couple of days, a number of them said like the only thing we have is our physical labor. Because I just bought this smallest thing of shaving cream and 1 razor that I might be able to use 2 or 3 times that I have to cut out 3 meals this week. I don't know how these people do it.
They will be working overtime hours just to get by, because they can't possibly get by on the wage that they're paid without working incredible amounts of overtime. And when you're working up to 15 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week, you know, your 2-year-old child just doesn't see you. You know, they don't get to see their children.
The kids can't even go to school. How are you going to break a cycle of poverty and have real economic development if you have a whole lost generation of children that aren't even educated? I'm walking down this dirt path into this village, and I see this massive pile of scrap shoe rubber that I later learned came from one of Nike's factories, and piles like that get dumped there all the time, and the end result of these piles is that they get burned in that village in the big open space where kids play, and the burning fumes, I learned from the company that designs Nike shoe rubber, will give off toxins and carcinogens. Kids are paying the price. And they're the ones with the chest infections, and they're the ones that are going to develop cancer. When we were in Indonesia, we made attempts to get into a Nike factory because Nike claims on their website we have nothing to hide.
I'm Mike.
Hi, Mike.
How you doing?
Good.
We went over to Nike's corporate offices, and Nike denied us that.
We're unable to accommodate that request.
So long.
See ya.
Nike headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon had faxed an info sheet out to all the factories to be placed on the wall for all workers to see that read, if you are approached by Jim Keati, Leslie Kretzer, or Mike Pirantozzi,
do not speak to them. They're only to speak to management. There will be severe consequences if you're found talking to them.
and they know from their management how they're supposed to act. And if they don't, there's some severe ramifications, anywhere from significant harassment to death. And I mean that in a very literal sense. Certainly management of the factory didn't want us to be there, and it was kind of frightening because we several times tried to get into the factory.
We weren't out of the van for more than 3 minutes, and there was security like surrounding us, and then the factory managers came out.
What's going on?
We're outside a Nike shoe factory right now. Security's kind of surrounded us.
They're like, what are you doing here? Well, why are you here? It was frightening, because who knows?
Security guy here tracking us down.
From that moment, we were tailed by factory security, the Preyman, or the local mafia. The local mafia certainly works in conjunction with these factory bosses. The factory bosses some of them are just brutal, ruthless, hired muscle to keep workers in line. And we met with one worker, Giulianto. He told us because he was union organized and he was trying to form an independent union.
He was threatened at gunpoint. He had his house ransacked. He was given death threats, and he had to flee back to his home village because, in fear of his life. This is literally a life and death issue. And this happens at all the factories.
Every worker that we talked to, struggled with this fear, this culture of fear that just permeates the air. That, they want to tell you the truth and try and fight for their rights, but they also want their kids to have a father or a mother. They're dealing every day with the threat of losing their lives for doing this kind of work. I mean, they show tremendous courage in light of that. We were able to meet with a woman by the name of Dita Sari, who had been organizing Nike and Reebok factory workers at the age of 23 and was illegally jailed and put in prison and tortured.
In 8th of July 1996, I was arrested by the army, the local army in East Java. They kicked me and they used their fists and their sticks and their booth to hurt me and to torture me in front of the workers to show them an example.
I think that the majority of workers are saying, look, we don't want you to pull out the jobs. We want to work. We like to work, we want to make the shoes. We were proud of what we do, but we don't want to be exploited. Why can't you just let us meet our basic needs?
We're talking about food, clothing, housing, healthcare, education, being able to take care of your kids and some modest savings. That's not a tall order.
Excuse me, do you guys know where the Nike campus is?
Yeah, you hang a right on Walker.
Yeah.
And you'll see it on your southwest corner.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we're on Nike's campus right now. It's a little bit different than the factories in Indonesia, just a tiny bit.
Hi.
How you doing?
Hi.
Keati.
How are you?
Hi, good to
Nice
see
to
you.
meet you finally.
Yeah.
Listen, I was hoping we could set up some time when we could talk. I'm really concerned about the workforce in Indonesia. I spent the summer there living with them and living on the wages that are paid to the factory workers.
You worried about that?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you call my secretary? Let's do that.
I did. I called Lisa last week. I called Beta. I called Dusty. I called Brad Feigl. I called Amanda.
You're going to have to talk to somebody else. Maybe we're going to talk to Dusty Kid.
But you're the guy, the buck stops at you, right?
Yeah, it doesn't start with me, though.
No, but I don't know who else to talk to. I
Talk
tried.
to Dusty Kid.
He doesn't want to talk to me.
Well, then I guess you're going to get through then.
But you're the man.
Thank you.
You're the man that needs to.
I appreciate your concern, but I'm having lunch with a friend, and
No,
we'll talk about it.
I apologize for interrupting
Sorry about
lunch. I've come all the way from New Jersey to talk to you about this.
Well, I'm not talking to you.
I've gotten stonewalled at every turn. The workers had asked of me that I try to bring you back to Indonesia to meet them in their homes, not in the office in Jakarta.
Do you understand no? You just got to know. I'm not going to talk to you about it.
Phil Knight, the CEO of Nike, or Michael Jordan, or Tiger Woods, or Mia Hamm, or any of the other people that are really making a lot of money because of the way that Nike does things, should care about these workers because they're human beings.
When I see people like Tiger Woods get $100 million just for wearing the clothes, we're saying as a society, like this one individual, because they play golf well, is worth more than 700,000 people.
Here's what he makes. We'd made up these wage charts and have him look down at it and then look up and say, Tiger Woods makes enough in a second to buy me a house. Why? I work hard for the company too. And what do you say to him? Well, hey, that's the system. Deal with it, suck it up. It's capitalism, survival of the fittest. Guess you're not the fittest. Nike is in Indonesia for one reason: cheap labor.
It's an ideology of maximizing profit at all costs to humanity and nature. And it's this entire, a vicious cycle that starts with the heads of the corporations that want to make a great return on shareholders' investment.
Some people say, well, hey, that's the way things are. That's the American way. It's capitalism. That's the American way. No, the American way is democracy. That's what our country was founded on. A belief that all people are equal, that there should be a respect for democracy, for human rights, and for the protection of human life. That's what we're about as Americans. We've spent the last year and a half traveling around the country, visiting over 100 schools, high schools and universities, 15,000 students.
So how are you feeling about the turnout?
I'm feeling pretty good about the turnout.
What are you thinking about the turnout here?
It's great. This is the best possible turnout.
And we try as best we can to introduce them to these human beings and say, as students, as high school athletes, as college athletes, as consumers, you've got tremendous power. And because we can't fly them over to Indonesia, we bring Indonesia to them. And if we can give them that spark, even if it's one or two on that day, that's going to multiply. And eventually we'll reach this critical mass and we'll have a great harvest. And the harvest will be truth and justice and fairness for all people. Something's wrong here and we can fix it. It's a necessity.
The tipping point is now.
At this point in our history, we need a story like this to be told.
Okay, so now that you have a sense of the conditions, in which Nike products are produced and the conditions in which the workers who produce Nike's products have to live, I want to talk to you a little bit more about Nike as a company. In the world of sports, Nike's got the best athletes in the world endorsing their products. For those of us who are athletes, we know they've got some of the best product out there, and most certainly they have some of the coolest commercials to try to entice us to buy their products. In the world of finance, Nike's revenues in fiscal year 2011, $20.9 billion in revenues, $2.1 billion in profits. So when most people in the mainstream of America, see if we can stop that. When most people in the mainstream of America look at the Nike Corporation, they see the awesome athletes, the great products, the cool commercials, and the bucket loads of money they're making. They say, wow, Nike's a really successful company. But as a Catholic community, we have a different measuring stick for success. It can't purely be about product and profit. Catholic social teaching demands that we also ask about people. And in this case, the people we need to ask about are the 1 million workers in 1,000 factories in 52 countries around the world that produce the real wealth for Nike. And when I say real wealth, I mean the stuff that you can touch with your hands, put on your feet, pull over your head. We need to ask questions about whether or not these workers are being paid a living wage,
We need to ask questions about whether or not these workers are being allowed to exercise their fundamental right to freely associate, to form trade unions. And when they do form trade unions, those unions are bargained with in good faith. So very simply, along with product and profit, we have to add that third P on equal or even greater footing, people. Now, how many of you heard something about Nike and their sweatshops before you showed up for my talk this afternoon? Who heard something about Nike and sweatshops? All right. Did anyone hear anything along these lines? Nike sweatshops, dude, that's an old issue. That was like 10 years ago. And I actually heard that Nike cleaned up their act. And in our business class, our professor was telling us that Nike's now a leader in corporate social responsibility. Has anybody heard anything like that before? Yes? Okay. Has anyone ever said anything like that before? All right, the reason that people say it, the reason that it's heard, the reason people say it, the reason that people believe it, the reason that unfortunately at times professors teach it is because Nike lies. I'm going to give you an example. After I did my experiment you just saw, trying to live like a factory worker, live on the wages, I go to the Sydney Olympics, partner with some groups there. We were doing this grassroots campaign. We were challenging Nike, one of the lead Olympic sponsors, and I was saying as an athlete that Nike was undermining the Olympic ideal of promoting peace and justice through sports by the way they were having the uniforms produced in sweatshops in places like Tangerang, Indonesia. Well, Nike responded with a very well-crafted public relations statement. They said, hey, those people at the Olympics talking about sweatshops, they have the right issue. They just have the wrong company. This statement means, yes, sweatshops exist, but Nike doesn't have any sweatshops. And they said this over and over and over again. Now, this is in September of 2000. You fast forward 5 years later, and because of pressure that was placed on Nike, primarily by students just like you, they had to start dealing with this issue in a little bit more concrete way than a PR statement. So Nike sent some people out in the field to go do some research for them. Now, I would argue that the methodology that was employed by these researchers was flawed. But even with the flawed methodology, Nike's own people found that in up to 50% of their factories, workers reported verbal, physical, sexual, and/or psychological abuse. In up to 100% of the factories, the work hours were exceeding Nike's own code of conduct. Now, wasn't this the company that 5 years prior told the world on the Olympic stage, no sweatshops here? They lied. And they've continued to lie and use public relations to confuse consumers and investors and activists and athletes and professors about what's really going on. Now, sometimes, and let me add this. That was 2005. As recently as 2011, we have reports of sun drenching. Workers on a production line put too much glue on a shoe. To punish them, they're taken out at noon when it's hottest on the equator, and they're made to stand in the sun and bake as a punishment. Verbal abuse, being called a pig, a dog, or a monkey. These may not sound too bad here, but in Indonesia, the largest Muslim country in the world, these barbs are particularly egregious. Physical abuse, workers being kicked, slapped, scratched, pelted with shoe parts. Workers being forced to work overtime and then not getting paid for the overtime that they worked. And the sources for these reports, Associated Press, Educating for Justice, that's me, and Nike themselves, under pressure from the AP, had to disclose some internal documents that had all this stuff in it. So clearly back in 2000, we had the right issue, and we most certainly had the right company. Now, why do I focus on Nike? Sometimes people who are a real sneakerhead and they love their Nikes are like, why are you picking on Nike? I always find that charge somewhat comical, that I'm picking on Nike. Given that Nike's a $20 billion corporation and I'm a one-man nonprofit working out of my apartment down on the beach in New Jersey with an $80,000 to $100,000 a year budget, I'm not exactly sure how I pick on any transnational corporation. You know, if this is a David versus Goliath fight, I can't even afford the rocks to sling at them. And the reason that I focus on Nike, as you can see by this slide, they're the industry leader. They are kicking their close competitors' butt. Adidas, Reebok, which is one company, if you didn't know that, they merged in 2006, almost 2-to-1 in the marketplace. Nike's also one of the top 50 brands in the world. They produce 50,000 different types of products each year, and they sell those products in more than 160 countries. This is a transnational corporate empire. And they exercise the values of empire that, the same as they did 2,000 years ago, it runs completely counter to the good news of Jesus' gospel. And that's something that we need to struggle with. Now, I want to be clear that it isn't just Nike that does this stuff. I have personally interviewed workers that produce for Nike, Adidas, Reebok, The Gap, Old Navy, Tommy Hilfiger, Polo, Ralph Lauren, Lotto, Fila, Levi's, Puma, Asics, Saucony, Converse, New Balance, all the same. I have colleagues that have interviewed workers that produce for Abercrombie, J. Crew, Sean John, Fubu, Fat Farm, Macy's, J.C. Penney, JanSport, Champion, you name it, 90 to 95% of the stuff that we're wearing right now were made under conditions like you saw in the video. We're looking at one company, an industry leader, as a case study, and we're looking at their operations in one country, Indonesia. Indonesia is the third largest producer of Nike footwear in the world, third only to Vietnam and China. Indonesia is strategically important in that there are more than 30 contract factories there, more than 140,000 workers producing Nike products. We have almost 20 years of objective research documenting what things are like for workers there. We also, in Indonesia, in 1998, they had a political revolution similar to what you're seeing now in the Middle East and here in cities in the United States. Since that time, well, they took down one of the most brutal military dictators in modern history. Since then, there's been this emerging democracy. Workers have greater freedoms. They've been able to push for some changes. We got a history that we can build upon. So the organizing strategy is fairly straightforward. Let's look at one industry leader, Nike, in one strategic country, Indonesia, and win. And winning would mean workers being paid living wages, and there being tri-party collective bargaining agreements, union contracts. Nike, factory, union. Everybody sits down at the table, they hash out the deal, they all sign it, they're all legally on the hook for what's in it. Then once we win, we've got a model that can be scaled and replicated. And we go from Nike in Indonesia to Nike in China, China to Vietnam, Vietnam to Mexico, Mexico to Honduras, Honduras to El Salvador. We hit the 52 countries where Nike operates. Then we go from Nike to Adidas, Adidas to Reebok, Reebok to the Gap. Then we go from clothes and shoes to electronics, like this thing I'm holding, or our iPhones, or iPads, or our cell phones, all made in sweatshops. We go from electronics to toys, the things you're going to buy for your little brothers and sisters in the next month or so for Christmas. All that stuff made in sweatshops. We go from toys to housewares, the stuff that you loaded up your dorm rooms and your apartments with before school, from Walmart and Kmart and Target and Kohl's, all that stuff made in sweatshops. And what we're going to start to do is build a global labor movement that's going to balance off the globalization of capital that has gobbled up communities and in some instances countries, all in the pursuit of maximizing profits for absentee owners, also known as shareholders. We're starting with a fairly modest approach, looking at one company in one country to get that win and create the model for change. Now, has there been any progress? I have been working on this issue for 14 years. I would hope I could stand in front of you today and say that I've been able to accomplish something. So I'm going to give you a couple of areas where we've seen some progress. One is with an issue called menstrual leave. Indonesian women by law are guaranteed 2 paid days off every month when they have their period. Now, usually young women in the US hear that and they're like, sign me up for that policy, right? Now, the reason this was put into place in theory, we got a production line right here. Product starts here, let's say it hooks around, ends here. Everybody does their little part. If someone in the middle of production happens to have their period, she's going to have to get up and go to the ladies' room a number of times during your shift. When you get up, product stops at your station, shoes start to pile up, efficiencies aren't being maximized, bad for business. In theory, better that you stay home. We'll adjust the line while you're gone for those 2 days, come back when you're ready to work. In practice, what was happening to young women who were trying to get their legally guaranteed menstrual leave break, if it were her, she'd have to go to the factory clinic, pull down her pants, and show blood in her underwear to prove she was menstruating to get her legally guaranteed break. Now, in the factories that I've been actively monitoring for the last decade in Indonesia, this has stopped. That's progress. An area where we have also seen some progress is with regard to the treatment of union organizers. You saw Giulianto in the video, threatened at gunpoint. Right? Well, let me say this, very generally, before I get into specifics of this case. You say the word union in the United States these days, and at times there's this negative visceral reaction. Unions are bad, they artificially drive up wages, they make us uncompetitive, unions suck, rah! Has anybody heard anything like that before? They're the Fox News watchers, right? Has anybody ever said anything like that before? I appreciate your honesty, and I'm sure there probably are a few more hands that could go up. Let me ask this question. How many people here like weekends? Who likes weekends? Yes, all right. How many people here, when you get out of Villanova, you get your first job, you like to have access to a health care plan so you can go to the doctor? Who wants health care? Yes, and how many of you, when you get out of Villanova, I'm going to guarantee you this, for our seniors next year, or this year rather, when you get out, in the first 6 months on your big job out of college, you are going to screw up royally. Everybody does. When that happens, how many of you want to be working at a place where your boss is not allowed to beat you for the mistake you made? Who wants that? All right, do you know who you have to thank for those 3 gains in the workplace? You can say it louder, it's okay. Unions, yes, the American labor movement, the people that brought you the weekend. Another reason that unions are important, let's come back to menstrual leave girl. What's your name?
Maddie.
Maddie, all right. Maddie the menstrual leave girl, that's it. All right, let's say that Maddie had to go through that humiliating experience that I described a few moments ago. Maddie comes home and she tells her friends what happened. Now, she was humiliated and embarrassed, but you had to share. And it turns out that it actually happened to all 3 of your best friends. But they were so humiliated and embarrassed, and they're not as strong as you, Maddie, that they didn't want to talk about it. So Maddie breaks open this dialogue. And now the friends get together and say, Maddie, you're the strongest out of all of us. You got to go in tomorrow and tell the boss this policy has to change. So Maddie does just that. She comes in to see me. I'm the boss the next day. And just as she's supposed to get on the line and start her shift, she comes into my office and puts her foot down and says, I'm not making another pair of sneakers until we change this menstrual leave policy. It's a violation of my rights as a woman. It's a violation of my basic worker rights and my human rights. As the boss, I might say to her, hey, Maddie, you know what? Don't let the door hit you in the rear end on the way out. The unemployment rate's through the roof. There's 1,000 people sitting outside those doors that would kill for your job. You may want to think about any demands you're placing on me right now. In this scenario, does Maddie have any real power? No. But could you imagine if it wasn't just Maddie that morning who came in? But when Maddie came into my office at 7 o'clock, when the factory's supposed to start churning out thousands and thousands of sneakers, 9,000 workers stood up in solidarity with her as part of the independent trade union on the factory floor and said, not another sneaker's going out the door today until we sort this menstrual leave policy out. Does she have power now? Yeah, it's the power of collective bargaining. It's the power of a trade union. And it's necessary at times to balance off the powers of capital and management. Now this guy here, his name is Rahmat. Rahmat works at PT Nikomas. It's the largest shoe production plant in Indonesia, 75,000 workers, 23,500 of whom produce for Nike. Rahmat is also a union official and organizer. What he is holding in his hands is his shirt. The stain you see on it is his blood. From the morning he went off to the factory, after being warned about organizing his fellow workers. And he's going across the dirt road to the gates of the plant, and he's jumped from behind by praymen, hired thugs. And he's beaten in the back of the head with a machete and left to die in his own pool of blood in the gutter as an example. Now, luckily for Rahmat and his wife and his daughter who you see here, he did not die that day. And I've had a chance to speak with Rahmat numbers of times over the years. And he shared with me that this level of physical intimidation of factory workers, actually until about 3 days ago, had stopped. And he specifically attributed its stopping to the cross-border solidarity work that was done by college students in the United States, putting public pressure on Nike and demanding that this kind of stuff not happen. That's progress. And that's the kind of power that you have. Now, I put a caveat that we stopped it for years, because I just got an email last night that workers have been beaten at a factory producing Nike products. They're demonstrating over an overtime issue and a wage cheating issue. I'm waiting to get the details. And so we may be back to this. But the fact that we had stopped it initially is a point of progress. Another area we've seen progress here and there is with regard to union busting. Not the physical beating of workers, but just making life really uncomfortable for them, moving them around the factory, demoting them. In this case, this guy here, Karyawan, who works at PT Chang Shin, a Nike shoe plant in Indonesia, he was illegally fired from his job. He was the duly elected chairman of the new trade union there. The factory felt that it was too soon for there to be a workers' union. One of his friends reached out to me. I had a member of my team reach out to him, document all the facts of the case. We were able to put some pressure on Nike, get him back in his job within 3 days. That's the kind of power we have to create change on the ground. So this was another point of progress. An area we have not seen as much progress as we would like is with regard to Nike's dumping and burning of their scrap shoe rubber. You saw it in the video, right? I never had any idea about this issue. I literally stumbled upon it my first summer in Indonesia in 2000. I come home from that trip. I tell Nike, I put them on notice, you got scrap shoe rubber from your factories being dumped and burned in villages? You might want to do something about it. Now, you would think if you go to NikeBiz.com and you pull up their corporate social responsibility report, if you choose to print it out, it's like this thick. A third of it is on Nike's environmental stewardship initiatives and how they're going to cut their carbon footprint and they're going to do closed-loop manufacturing, which means there would be no waste, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you would think if Nike were really committed to what was on the paper, if they heard, hey, you got scrap shoe rubber being dumped and burned from your factories, they would, where? Can you give us more information? Anything you can tell us would be great, please. No, Nike was too busy at this time doing what I call cause marketing. They were signing up for partnerships with the Cirrus Principles, the World Wildlife Fund, the UN Climate Savers Program, and these sound great. And if you're just sitting at home one night and you're flipping through the channels and you see, today Nike signed a partnership with the World Wildlife Fund to help protect the environment, blah, 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 blah. In your head it registers, World Wildlife Fund, those are the panda bear people. They'll never let Nike hurt the environment. And you trust it. And you shouldn't, because this is all nonsense. They're just voluntary initiatives. There's actually a study done by a couple of academics on the UN Climate Savers Program and the UN Global Compact with corporations, and they basically said it does nothing other than give corporations public relations cover. Because there's no research that's done to see whether or not these companies are living up to what they said they were going to do in the press conference. And if the research was done, there's no penalty mechanisms in place. But it sounds really good. Well, research was done and it was found they were in violation. There's no penalty mechanisms in place. But it sounds really good in a press release. And if you do your Google search or your LexisNexis search, because you've got to write a paper on corporate responsibility and corporations trying to be environmentally friendly, you're going to have thousands of hits come up from all the press work that they did with this stuff. I go back in 2001. I find even bigger piles of scrap shoe rubber. 2002, more sites, bigger piles. This was Nike's official response to me talking about this in 2002. This is Public Relations 101. I'm going to break it down for you. Here they say, in the first paragraph, we feel the need to address Nike's environmental sustainability efforts. Through our unique Reuse a Shoe collection program, Nike recycles over 2 million pairs of athletic shoes annually and converts them into sports courts for kids to play soccer, basketball, tennis, or whatever sport can be supported at that facility. Awesome program. And I would encourage you to use it. I'd actually encourage Villanova University to set up a partnership with them so that students wouldn't have to find a Nike Town or a Nike outlet store. You could put a bin outside the athletic department, and when you're done with your sneakers, any brand, instead of throwing them out and having them end up in a landfill, Nike will take them back, they separate them, they take the rubber, and I'm sure there's some artificial turf fields here at Villanova now, yes? You know when you dig in on those little black specks that shoot up, those rubber specks, that might be Nike regrind. Awesome reuse of the product. Does that have anything to do with scrap shoe rubber being dumped and burned in Indonesia? No. But what they're trying to plant in your head here in this paragraph, Nike recycles shoes. And then they make the leap. Therefore, the disposal of footwear soles by burning that Mr. Keati discusses in his presentation are either counterfeit or unauthorized. Counterfeit or unauthorized. This is right behind a Nike factory. To my left in this picture would have been an open field about 3 football fields deep. And I've got the videotape, the piles, the burn spots on the ground, the trucks rolling in, the women dumping this stuff off the trucks, saying they've been doing it every day, twice a day for almost 20 years. So for years, I continue to press Nike on this issue. Summer of 2008, I get a phone call. Caitlin Morris, at the time Nike's Director of Sustainable Business and Innovation. Nike wants to meet with me. So we set up a meeting in Manhattan. I sat at a table at a restaurant, pretty much did this presentation. And this is one thing they were very interested in. And I said, look, if you don't believe me, it's not rocket science doing the research on this. Have one of your people sit outside one of the factories. Don't let the factory know you're coming. Wait for the trucks to leave. Follow them. See what you find. So they did that. They sent their top guy in Asia, He went from China to Indonesia to research this. He sits outside one of the factories. He waits for the truck to leave, files into a site where they eventually had to clean up 180 dump truck loads of scrap shoe rubber and spend a couple of $100,000 on the environmental remediation of the site. That's one site from one factory in a country that they had been on notice on this issue for almost a decade. What's going on in China and Vietnam, Thailand, where nobody's watching the shop? So from that experience that the Nike guy had came the Nike footwear waste management system. They're going to target different types of waste, segregate it, measure it. They're going to collect it, send it out to various sites. The E2 teams, doesn't that sound cool? The E2 teams are going to validate the data and report back to corporate every quarter, right, with their E2 audits. 2009, I got that woman from Nike, Caitlin Morris, to come with me to Indonesia. 10 years of lobbying to get a Nike executive out of the boardroom and into the fields. She was in shock for the entire week she was with me. Her expression was this. Brought to tears on 3 occasions, listening to workers tell their stories. And one of the parts of the deal was that I would now get into Nike factories. And they wanted to show me this. And I'm giving the grand tour, and they're showing me where they separate on the factory floor, and here are the bins, and this is where it's going to go, and this is a result of your engaging us on this issue, Jim, et cetera, et cetera. I said, okay, we'll see. I'm back in Indonesia 6 months after that. I sit outside the factory. I wait for the truck to leave. I followed it to this dump site. This was from one of the factories that I had been given the grand tour of the new Nike waste management system. Now, doing this part of my work is not the most pleasant. These dumps are not fun places to go to. In 2002, when I was researching this issue, my van was hijacked. We were brought back to the dump. My driver was beaten. I ended up on my knees with the guy who ran the dump standing over me with a sword saying, if you come back here, I will kill you. So this time around, I posed as a Canadian filmmaker doing a documentary on environmental initiatives in Indonesia. So the guys were a little more forthcoming, and they shared with me that this is what happens to that scrap shoe rubber every day at 4 o'clock. Now, over the years, I've taken stuff from the dumps. I've brought it home. I got a friend who's a professor who used to be at MIT. He's now at Cal Berkeley. His name is Dara O'Rourke. He actually has worked with Nike on some of these issues. He's an expert on supply chain management issues and on these materials. I asked him, I said, Dara, if we light this thing on fire right now on your desk, what would happen? Please don't. And it would just give off some nasty toxins and carcinogens. And burning this stuff at a low, slow heat, open flame is possibly the worst way to dispose of this material. Toxins and carcinogens from its burning. What's in that plume of smoke? Right? Open fields behind that dump. Who plays in open fields? I sent my team back. I published all this stuff. I sent my team back a couple months afterwards. This site has been cleaned up. So we made some progress there. I was back in Indonesia 6 months after that. Put Nike on notice on this one. I was back in Indonesia 2 months ago. Now, to give that some scale, I'm 6'4". Right? I was standing on about 6 feet of scrap shoe rubber. I'm up about 2.5 feet here. And then look what's up above my head. And behind me, it's sprawled out. So we have a ways to go on this issue. Oh, the other thing is that in those piles that you saw in those last 2 pictures, in the past when I went to the sites, you could find Nike identifiers all over the place. Swoosh cutouts, swooshes they didn't use, Nike shoe parts cut in half. You don't find that anymore because they don't want the identifiers out there, but you just have to dig a little bit. Which again is not a fun part of doing this work at the dumps. All right, another issue that we are working on, have seen some progress, is with forced overtime and wage cheating. These workers here, actually that's Rahmat, the guy that got beaten with the machete, the guy in the white shirt, the guy immediately to his left, that's Rahmat, so he's okay. In this meeting, these workers shared with me that at PT Nicomas, workers are being forced to work the jam malur. Jam is hour, malur is delay, the hour of delay. They weren't being paid for it. They were forced to do this in the sewing divisions. The hourly wage for a 4th hour of overtime would be $1.40. Now, technically that's not true because you're only legally and by contract allowed to do 3 hours of overtime. So you couldn't legally do a fourth. But if you just took the third hour rate and tacked it on the fourth hour, that would be the rate. They were being forced to do this 6 days a week, and if the allegations are accurate, they were cheated out of about $5.4 million last year. I published this report. The next day, within 12 to 18 hours, I get an email from Nike. We'll look into it. I get a phone call from the head corporate attorney for the Pao Chen Group, Nike's partner at these factories. They want, he thought I just got bad information. I get a letter from the management saying all my allegations are incorrect. I get a letter from the union people that I met with in the photo just before this that said, Jim, we're not sure where you got your information from, because all those people were brought in and they were put under a significant amount of pressure to recant everything that they said. But we didn't stop there. Took it to the district level union. District level sent in undercover teams, and they found that everything that I had documented was absolutely correct. It then went to the national level union. National level unions got some power. They leveraged some pressure on Nike. Nike sent 2 teams in, one formal, one undercover. Not only did they find everything that I found, but on top of it, they found some pretty nasty cases of verbal and physical abuse. So on September 13th, I got a letter from the management at the factory saying that, yes, we regret to admit that the allegations set forth, there was some merit to them. So now they're negotiating. They just got a third party to come in to do an analysis of how much people were cheated out of. Now, I feel just getting them to admit that this stuff was going on was a victory. I will feel much better when the check is written and those workers get the money they were cheated out of. So we made some progress there. All right. How many people here either now or at some point in your life have owned a pair of Nike sneakers? Let's see the hands. Keep them up. All right, look around the room. If the Nike rep was here, they'd be very happy right now. All right, when I was in high school, do we have any long-time Villanova basketball fans? Yes, a few? Okay, so when I was in high school playing with Mark Dowdell, does anybody remember Mark? Yes, late 80s. I was playing basketball with Mark at Christian Brothers Academy in Lincroft, New Jersey. You got any CBA grads here? Nice, good to see you. I had a high-end pair of Nike basketball sneakers back in '89. Those cost about $75 a pair. Does anyone here own the latest pair of Air Jordans? It's okay if you do. All right, those are more than $220 a pair, although they come with a carrying case and promotional CD-ROM. Now, whether it is a lower-end pair of cross trainers, high-end pair of Jordans, those shoes on average cost Nike $16.25 to produce. $10.75 in the materials, $2.43 in the labor, overhead $2.10, factory profit 97 cents. A couple of interesting stories about this slide. Nike tracks where I go. Ralph, did you get a letter from anyone from Nike yet? Not yet? Okay. It probably will come. They track where I go. They track any media that comes out of it. So I'm doing my talk about a year and a half ago at the University of Minnesota at Morris. Student newspaper writes up a really nice piece, and they focused in heavily on this cost breakdown. I get an email from someone in Nike's corporate responsibility division. Hey, Jim, I just read the article from the University of Minnesota at Morris. The guys in the sourcing division are a little upset because they're saying that the information that you're sharing, the data you have, isn't correct. So can you just tell us where you got your data from on this? I said, no problem. Can you go back to the guys in sourcing and tell them that I got it off of your website? So you won't find that at NikeBiz.com anymore. When I was in Indonesia in 2009 and I was with Caitlin Morris, the woman from Nike, and I got to go into the factories, I got to meet factory managers for the first time. And I wanted to really take advantage of that opportunity and make sure some of the stuff that I've been saying was accurate. This was one thing I definitely wanted to make sure of. Now, I didn't have a fancy setup like this with the big screens. I just had butcher paper and a marker, and I'd jump up in the front of these boardrooms we're in and start writing down the numbers. And as I'm going through the cost breakdown, the managers are going, no. Your number's too high. Nike only pays us on average $10 to $11 for a pair of sneakers. And they've been paying us the same amount for almost 20 years. So can you see how you can grow a company from a couple $100 million to a $20 billion empire if you can flatline your wholesale costs over a 20-year period, but take your high-end retail from 75 to 220 in that same time period? And doesn't this bust one of the myths that the market fundamentalists try to peddle on us? Wasn't this thing, the globalization of capital, globalization, wasn't it supposed to get us cheaper products? All right? I turned 40 last month. I haven't seen Nike's product prices go down in my lifetime. Have any of you? They're getting the labor cheaper and cheaper. Aren't the prices supposed to go down? And so again, it's something that we need to tap into, we need to discuss to bust those myths that unfortunately get taught at business schools at places like Villanova University. Now, what I hope you come away with today is a greater appreciation at a minimum for this highlighted $2.43 of labor. You see, labor is not another commodity like materials, it's not another line item like overhead. Labor's people. It's men, women, and unfortunately sometimes children that make the clothes and the shoes that we love to buy and wear. And the first thing we owe our fellow human beings is the recognition of the fact that they are not simply cogs in the machine of production. They are children of God, and they have inherent dignity. And we have to ensure that their dignity is protected and respected as they make the stuff that we love to buy and wear. Now, from this $2.43 of labor is generated the pool of money by which workers' wages are paid. Basic wage for a Nike factory worker in Tangerang, Indonesia today is 1,285,000 rupiah. People say, what is that in dollars? Well, it doesn't matter because Indonesian workers don't buy things in dollars, but if you want to know, the rupee is trading at about 8,500 to the dollar right now, so this is like 150 bucks, right? What can you buy with this wage? Your rent is going to cost you $200,000 for the month. Your drinking water, $25,000. Transportation, $350,000. You add those three up. It's $575,000. Subtract the $575 from the $1.285. You're left with $710,000 rupiah to pay for everything else for the rest of the month. You take the $710,000 rupiah, you divide it by the average amount of days in a month, which is, well done, and you have 23,667 rupiah per day to pay for everything else beyond these three expenses. How many people here like to eat? You like to eat, yes. You will get one meal at the factory. It's not the greatest. I've seen it, and it really troubles me because what I saw wasn't that great, and I know that the week after the monitors leave, the quality goes down. So I can't imagine what it looks like when people like me aren't around. But you got a deal. Beggars can't be choosers. You're going to need two other meals. A simple meal of rice, vegetables, piece of chicken at the Wartec, the local food stall, 9,000 rupiah. Two of those, 18,000 rupiah. If you want to wash one of those meals down with something other than water, like a bottle of local iced tea, local brand of iced tea, 2,000 rupiah. You now just spent 20,000 rupiah. How many people here like to have a snack during the day? Who likes snack time? Yes? All right. If you wanted to get a healthy snack as a worker, 2 bananas, 2,000 rupiah. You just spent 22,000. And you got 23,600 left, or you have 23,600 rather for the day. What about other basic needs? How many people here use soap? Soap? All right, the person next to you didn't raise their hand. It's probably a good thing, but that's another lecture to book. Toothpaste? We're all wearing clothes and shoes. We have phones. We have bags to carry our stuff around in. Now, I'm not talking about Rolls Royces and yachts and third vacation homes. I'm talking about basic commodities that we need each day to make us feel like a full human being. Could you imagine if a worker actually had the audacity to want to purchase a pair of the sneakers that they've been producing for upwards of 20 years? This is what it would cost. This is at one of the malls in Jakarta. 1 month and a third's wages. Let me scale this for you. The spending power or lack thereof. If you get out of Villanova and you get a job where you're taking home $3,000 a month, to scale this spending power to this, a pair of Nike sneakers would cost you about $4,000. You know what's crazy about this? See, all these sneakers that are on the rack and the ones that were in the picture before that, now they're made, sneakers like this are made at factories anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours around this mall in Jakarta. Do you know where all these sneakers are made? Vietnam and China. Why? Because of the ridiculous rules of the World Trade Organization and the trade agreements that are put in place in these EPZs, the export processing zones, the free trade zones, that everything has to be made for export. So you talk about a complete misallocation of resources and about not keeping dollars circulating in the local economy. Even if you approach this from a business standpoint, from a market fundamentalist standpoint, there's arguments to be made to increase workers' wages. Look at Henry Ford. Now, I don't agree with everything that Ford did. But one of the things that I like about Ford, he said, I want every worker on the assembly line being paid enough money to buy one of the cars that they're making. I think that makes good business sense. So what do? Well, we fight to make Nike fair trade. We're not talking about free trade, which you hear all the time, right? Which is really just deregulation and Wild West capitalism. Talking about fair trade, people, products, along with profits. Fair trade generally says that people are as important as profits. I'm crazy enough to think that people are more important than profits. Maybe that makes me a revolutionary. Now, there are a number of definitions of what fair trade is. There's a lot of principles. For me, it really boils down to that top sentence there. That people are as important, if not more, than profits. So to make Nike fair trade, I think generally they'd have to do three things. They'd have to treat their workers like human beings and not simply a line item. And if you want to show us that you're treating your workers like human beings, pay them a living wage. And sit down and negotiate with them in good faith. Let's get those tri-party union contracts in place. Now, is this even possible? Yeah, because it's happening right now. There's a company called Altagracia, just launched within the last year. They're down in the Dominican Republic. They're paying their workers 3 times the minimum wage. They're paying them a living wage. The brand owns the factory, so they can directly negotiate with the union, and there's a great union contract in place. They sell their products on 400 campuses. Do they sell them in the bookstore here at Villanova? No? So that's one thing we're going to talk about, our action items to change. And the products are priced competitively. If you had an Altagracia shirt sitting next to a Nike shirt, sitting next to a Gap shirt, all the same. So if this small company can create a high-end product, competitively price it in the marketplace, and their market share, remember the graph I had up earlier in the presentation with the breakdown of the market shares? Altagracia wouldn't even register as a line on that pie graph. And if this little company can do it, there's no reason that Nike can't. So that's what we have to push for. And we have to always remember as we're pushing that wages. See, Nike took our eyes off this for a while. When the activists like myself were pressing them in the late 90s, if this were a boxing match, we were landing some heavy, heavy blows. We had them against the ropes. We won round 1. Nike fought back with a vengeance, and I would argue that they won round 2. We're now into round 3, and we have to remember as we continue to fight nonviolently that wages are key. Catholic social teaching tells us that there are a number of things that determine a just workplace, but none is more important than wages. Now, what does Nike say about workers' wages? They are a little schizophrenic on this issue. Here's Phil Knight, the chairman of the board. Reporter asks him, Mr. Knight, do you feel comfortable your workers are making a living wage? Absolutely. No question about it. Give me the data upon which you are basing this assertion. And give me your definition of a living wage. Because I find it interesting, Mr. Knight, as the founder and chairman of the company, that you are saying to the press, to the world, that your workers in the factories are absolutely paid a living wage. Because if I go to your corporate responsibility report, it says some worker advocates suggest that a living wage should be paid. We do not support this approach. Then you had Vader Manager, former director at Nike, said they have the right issue but the wrong company when talking about wages. There's the PR line again, right? We raised wages 70% in Indonesia. Nike raised wages 70%, he's saying. He then goes on to say, we have a code that applies globally and that provides wages that far surpass regional or national minimum wages. That sentence is a complete lie. And I would encourage you to exercise what in academia is called the hermeneutic of suspicion. Question everything. Go to NikeBiz.com, pull up their code of conduct. If you find that sentence anywhere in it, I'll come back to Villanova. You can dress me in Villanova stuff, head to toe. I'll go out at the halftime of the St. Joe's game, standing there in that Villanova stuff, ringing a bell, holding a sign saying I was wrong. Possibly the worst punishment you could ever do. We raised wages 70% in Indonesia. What Mr. Manager fails to tell you is that when this raise happened, it was during the Asian financial crisis in the late 90s, when the Indonesian rupiah plummeted on international currency markets. It basically wasn't worth the paper that it was printed on. So even though there was a raise in wages for the workers, because of the exchange rate and the power of the dollar against the rupiah, they were getting the labor cheaper than they were getting before then they gave them the raise. Little bit of fuzzy math that he doesn't tell you about. It is not possible for us to mandate what wages should be paid by the factories to workers. Moreover, this data is not something that we collect. It is owned and managed by factories, which is why Nike cannot disclose workers' wage rates. Let's take the second sentence first. Because factories are not Nike owned, it is not possible for us to mandate what wages should be paid by the factories to workers. We raised wages 70% in Indonesia. Which is it? Can you mandate it or can't you? Nike does require that factories manufacturing our products comply with local legal minimum wages, and this is something we aim to verify in our auditing process. Do we have any accounting majors here? Accounting majors? Anyone? Not a one? Yes? Okay, when you're going to audit a company, what are you gathering from them? Information, also known as data, right? So in this case, they're saying, we got to make sure that they're paying the legal minimum so they're not breaking the law, right? In order for them to know that, wouldn't they have to gather data on the wages at every factory? Moreover, this data is not something that we collect. They're lying in the same paragraph. So can you see why I started this segment saying Nike's a little schizophrenic on this wage issue? Now, can workers demand a living wage? Absolutely. And they have pressed for that kind of stuff. But what happens is Nike turns around and says, if you want a raise, you come to the wrong people. Don't come to us. If you want to raise, lobby the government, and if the government raises the minimum wage, we'll do whatever we need to do to comply because we want to be good global corporate citizens. Who's heard that argument before? It's the governments in these host countries. It's their problem. They need to fix this stuff. Has anybody heard that? Here's why I think it's nonsense and why this should be more market-based. Right? What's your name? Chris. Chris, I'm going to take you out of Villanova. I'm going to get you a job at Nike Corporate. You're going to work in the marketing division. You're going to make commercials. Chris, you're really good at what you do. You've been there 6, 7 years. You're in early every day. You're the man there, right? Eventually, you might come into your boss and ask for a raise. Is that a revolutionary concept to ask for a raise? No. And if I were your boss, Chris, I might say, Chris, listen, you don't got to tell me, man. I get it. You're in early every day. You're the last guy to leave. You're the most creative guy I've ever had on my team. But I got to tell you, if you really want a raise, do you know what you should do? You should go to Washington, D.C. and lobby members of Congress. And if Congress raises the minimum for mid-level ad executives, hey, we'll do whatever we need to do because we want to be good corporate citizens. Who thinks that sounds ridiculous? Right? Because in this example, does Chris work for the U.S. government? No. So why is he asking the government for his raise? Who does he work for? Nike. So who should he get his raise from? Nike. Who do these workers work for? So who should they get their raise from? Nike. Now, I did my talk last spring at Furman University. In the audience, over here on my left, was sitting the cross-country coach at Furman. He's a cross-country coach in retirement. He's actually one of the first 12 guys that started the Nike Corporation. He was there when Phil Knight began the whole thing. Before I even said a word, smoke was coming out of this guy's ears, right? So when I asked that question that I just asked you, who do these workers work for? Where all of you say, Nike, subcontractors. That was one of the handful of times he interrupted my presentation, but it's okay. And I said, sir, I might agree with you. And you might make the argument, and I could possibly agree with it, where you say, it's the subcontractors, it's not fair of you to put that on Nike. Well, I would agree if it wasn't for what Nike has said on this. Here's Phil Knight, the chairman of the board. Reporter says these employees that are affected, they're technically not Nike employees, they're employees of subcontractors. But you said basically you accept responsibility for the conditions under which they work. No question, says Phil Knight. And we really look at it as more than a subcontracting relationship. It's really a partnership, not in the legal sense, but in the moral sense. That's some strong language. Dusty Kidd, former VP at Nike. This was in response to my campaigning on this issue at St. John's when I got started. He said, it's real simple. Phil and I kind of defined it about 2 years ago. Those workers, we should consider them Nike employees. So that's our responsibility. We should consider them Nike employees. Do you know what that sounds like to me? We should consider them Nike employees. So if they're Nike employees, who should they get their raise from? Nike. Now we need to hold these executives accountable, responsible for what they've said. They either need to live up to it or retract it, one of the two. I think there are some other stakeholders that have some responsibility. I think the big-time athletes that endorse Nike products have some moral responsibility in this case. What LeBron James makes in 2 hours playing hoops, one game, what he makes just to wear the products that are made in the factories would take a factory worker 9.5 years working at the factory to make that same amount of money. I just think there's something wrong with that picture. Now we can also, we can have that moral outrage, and I can see it in some of your faces, and the heads are shaking, where we're looking at the executives and saying they need to be held morally accountable, and we're looking at the big-time athletes and saying they need to be held morally accountable. And now this is where the gospel gets real. This is where it cuts close to the bone. This is where a Catholic university is prostituting itself to the highest bidder, taking the name and the reputation of Villanova University and selling it. And what's worse is that we prostitute our student athletes in the process. Do we have any student athletes here? You're my kind of people. I'm not mad at you. Don't worry. I'm an athlete myself. Do we have any student athletes here? Yes, no, maybe so? Okay. What sport do you play? Swim team. Do you wear Nike as well? Yeah. Okay. When you decided to come to Villanova and you signed your letter of intent or you were just recruited by the coach, did anybody sit you down at any point and say, you're going to be a walking advertisement for a transnational corporation that's exploiting poor people around the world and basically runs counter to everything that the Catholic University and Catholic social teaching stands for? Are you cool with that? Did anybody say that to you? No. Don't you think they should have at least given you some basic information? And not just from Nike? Because that happens sometimes. Athletic departments running for cover will bring in the Nike people. That's like, I jokingly say, it's like when I was at St. Joe's, and they were, trying to clamp down on the drinking with the fraternities, right? They put us in charge of policing ourselves, right? Somewhat ineffective. Let's say you come out of here today, and you say, you know what? I came to Villanova to get an education, to represent my school and to play my sport. I don't want to wear the Nike logo. At a minimum, I want to cover it up. I'll wear the Villanova V, but I want to cover up the Nike swoosh. Don't you think you should be given the right to do that? To exercise your conscience, if it's informed, particularly informed by your Catholic faith and Catholic social teaching? You know what you would do if you covered that logo up? My guess, having done this for a long time, you're going to violate the contract. Because you're not allowed to spat, is what it's called in the industry, putting tape or anything else over that logo. But shouldn't you be allowed the freedom to do that? Should student athletes here be allowed to do that? Who thinks they should? If they had a moral disagreement with that, awesome. For our student activists that are here, you got an issue that you can start mobilizing people around. So now what do we do? How do we fight? How many people here are feeling a little overwhelmed with the information I've shared so far? Who's feeling a little overwhelmed? Okay, is anybody here feeling guilty? Good Catholics, right? Is anybody here thinking during the presentation, oh my God, all my clothes are made in a sweatshop, what am I going to do? Does anybody think that? Yes? Oh, it's okay. I'm not going to leave you feeling that way like, hey, the world's a terrible place, it sucks out there. Thanks, Villanova. Good night. I want to give you some really concrete things that you can do to get involved. Here's where I would like you to take your cell phones out. Cell phones, or if you're old-fashioned, a piece of paper and a pen. I want you to join Team Sweat. Team Sweat is a coalition of students, workers, consumers, activists, athletes, academics, investors. We're all putting pressure on Nike to make Nike a fair trade company. When you join us, the first thing I want you to do is learn more. I'd like you to get in your phone right now. This will be the only time that a professor or a teacher will say to you, I don't care if your head's down and you're pecking away on your phone. Get our website into your phone now. Go, thumbs, move, make it happen. You already got it. All right, so teamsweat.org, or you can check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/teamsweat. I would encourage you to read the following books. Do we have any business majors here? Business majors, hands up, it's okay. Any business professors? I would encourage, if there are, add these books into your reading list. And I can put this back up at the end so we can keep moving. When Corporations Rule the World by Corton, Fair Trade for All by Stieglitz, Confessions of an Economic Hitman by Perkins, No Logo by Naomi Klein, Made in Indonesia by Dan Labatz. I would also encourage you, in terms of learning more, sign up for classes with professors that are critical of our current global economic system. Do we have any of those at Villanova? Yes? No? Maybe so? Yes? Okay. Do we have any liberation theologians at Villanova? Find out, if they're here. Sign up for their classes. If you want to get email updates to learn more about the campaign, when you go to teamsweat.org, click join. Or if you want to get text message updates, I only send text messages out when it's something important. I will not inundate you with text messages. Right now, you can text the word sweat to 313131. So that we're learning more. The next thing I want you to do is speak out. Keep your phones out. This is the personal email address of the CEO of the Nike Corporation. His name is Mark Parker. His email address is mark.parker@nike.com. You can start sending Mr. Parker an email right now. I mean, some people do that. Right? What's your name?
Maria.
Maria? Maria. Right? Sometimes I'll get a copy, because you copy me, info@teamsweat.org, and it'll be, Dear Mr. Parker, my name's Maria. I'm a junior at Villanova University. Jim Keati is standing in front of me right now. I just learned about your sweatshops. I want you to become a fair trade company. I like your products, but you can also treat your workers fairly. Thank you. Send it off. It matters. Some people go, dude, the guy won't even get those. I know he's getting them. I've already been, another executive at Nike has reached out to me. Jim, will you please stop asking the students to write to Mark? As you can see, I have respectfully declined their request. So speak your mind. Speak that truth to power. In the subject line, put Make Nike Fair Trade, so he knows it's coming from us. You can also post your thoughts. If you go to teamsweat.org, you go to our Facebook page. You can hit us up on Twitter at teamsweat. Say what you want to say to the world about this issue. Right? Let your voice be heard. You will be another voice in the chorus crying out for justice. You can also sound off on camera. I have my video camera up here. You come up at the end. You would stand in front of the camera and you would say, hi, my name's Jim. I'm a sophomore at Villanova. I'm a student athlete. Listen, Nike, I wear your products when I compete, and I like the way they fit. They're good quality, but I also care about humanity. And I'd like you to pay the workers a living wage who make the stuff that I compete in every day. Please. And I take those videos and I put them up on our websites, and it's you lending your voice to the campaign. And Nike pays attention. Kids from 12 to young adults at 22 spend about $423 billion in the global marketplace. You are their demographic. They will listen. You can also, and the last thing in terms of speaking out, how many people here have friends? Who has friends? All right, the person next to you, he didn't raise his hand. Will you give him a hug, please, and be his friend? Thank you. I want you to email 3 friends. Email, text message, call them, smoke signals, whatever you do to get in touch with your friends. And I hope you would say something like, we had this really cool presentation today at Villanova. Maybe you want to bring this Behind the Swoosh program, this guy Jim Keati, to your school. And that's how I get a lot of events, is by students and faculty and staff telling other students and faculty and staff. I'll give you an example. I had there was a student or a faculty member sent an email to a teacher at Brophy College Prep, a Jesuit high school in Arizona. Because that one email got sent, I got brought in there. I got to speak to 1,400 guys in one shot. That's an easy action you can take to help us spread the word about this campaign. So we're learning more. We're speaking out. The next thing you can do if you want is to contribute to the campaign. Team Sweat is run through Educating for Justice, the nonprofit that I started 11 years ago to do this work. I operate on a bare bones budget, as I said, about maybe $80,000 to $100,000 a year. To give you something to compare that to, like Amnesty International, just their U.S. budget is $20 million a year. So I'm as small as it gets. So every penny counts. I like people to get something back for their donation. So how many of you like the movie that I showed in the beginning? You like the short film? I have DVDs, copies of that. I asked for a $15 contribution. Makes for a nice stocking stuffer for Christmas. Or in 2 weeks you get it when the whole family's around at Thanksgiving. Just plop it in and walk out of the room. Also, I have our fair trade t-shirts up here. I asked for a $15 contribution for these. These are triple bottom line. You remember the company Altagracia that I mentioned before? That's where these are from. So if you pick up one of these shirts, you're helping support workers that are being paid a living wage and have a good union contract. The proceeds from the shirt go to the Team Sweat campaign, so you're helping us to fight with workers to get them living wages and good union contracts. And the triple bottom line is that you get a really cool t-shirt. It is provocative. This will cause conversations. So you better know something about the issue if you're going to grab one. I've got smalls in navy and white, all the way up to double XLs are in the bag up here. You can come up at the end if you want to get one of those. So we're learning more, we're speaking out, we're making a contribution. I also want you to be ready to fight. I want you to be ready to fight like these students here at a Catholic university in Indonesia, in Bandung, who had me do my presentation at their school, and they're trying to figure out ways to work with their fellow country people to get them the justice they deserve. I want you to be ready to fight like these young women here, 18, 19 years old, who sat down to tell me their stories despite the fact that just meeting with a guy like me might cause them some problems. I want you to be ready to fight like these union leaders here that I met with just two months ago. And in this meeting, we were sharing information. I'm working on 3 different cases right now that we're advocating for workers. I want you to be ready to fight like students were last summer. There was 2 factories in Honduras where workers were denied their severance pay. Nike shut the factories down because the workers were pressing for change. They denied their severance pay. The factory refused to pay it. The workers went to Nike because of Nike's claimed public commitments to their workers. Nike said, no way, not us, don't come to us, go to the factory, go to your government, leave us alone. And I've watched Nike do this numbers of times over the last decade. Well, in this situation, the workers partnered with the United Students Against Sweatshops, a student group here in the U.S. that's active on more than 200 campuses around the country. And they launched the Just Pay It campaign. And students were doing street theater on their campuses to raise awareness about the issue. They brought workers from Honduras up to the U.S. to tour schools like this, to tell their own stories. They were going in and they were doing takeovers of university administrators' offices, taking the office over, doing hunger strikes, really putting their feet, their bodies on the line for justice, doing what in Catholic social teaching is called the preferential option for the poor, taking a stand of justice with the poor, the marginalized, the dispossessed, the laborer. And because of their actions, because of the work that these students did in solidarity with the workers, University of Wisconsin-Madison and Cornell University cut their endorsement contracts with Nike. And it only took 2 schools to do that. Now, one of the questions I was asking, having gone to Catholic school from first grade through graduate school, where were the Catholic schools on this? And doesn't this harken back to the gospel where Jesus says, the pagans may get into the kingdom before you do? Now, I'm not saying they're pagans at Cornell or Wisconsin-Madison, but I think you get my point. And because of the work that students did, facing pressures, this is in the Times, facing pressures from universities and student groups, the apparel maker Nike announced on Monday that it would pay $1.54 million to help 1,800 workers in Honduras who lost their jobs when 2 subcontractors closed their factories. Unprecedented victory. I'd never seen anything like it in my 14 years working on this. And do you know who made it happen? Students just like you. That's the kind of power you have to bring about change on behalf of justice in our global economy. Now that is going to end my formal presentation. I'm going to open up the floor for just about 5 minutes for questions, thoughts, or comments. Before I do that, if there is something that you disagreed with that I said, or if you disagreed with everything that I said, please put it on the table now while I'm standing here in front of you. And don't send me an angry anonymous email 3 days from now calling me a communist. All right? I'm far worse. I'm a Catholic. So questions, thoughts, or comments? And there's microphones here. Okay, so there we go. There's one. I'm going to turn the lights up. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you for coming to Villanova. I really liked the presentation. I just had a question. Did you ever think about possibly showing this presentation to some of the athletes that are endorsed by Nike, or perhaps getting them as a spokesman
Yeah,
for this?
I would love to. If you're a soccer fan, by any chance, you might know who Timmy Howard is. It's our national team goalkeeper. I was Tim's backup when he first went pro. Right? We've personally approached Mia Hamm, one of arguably the best women's player ever. Tisha Venturini, Christine Lilly. I thought the women's team would be much more open to this. Hand-delivered reports to a number of the top women's soccer players in the world on the menstrual leave issue. You think women would care, right? Not a word. We had a postcard campaign going to Tiger Woods for like 2 years. Never heard a word. Michael Jordan's kids went to her high school, right, a Jesuit school out in Illinois. I did this presentation there a few years back. Jordan's daughter was there at the school at the time. I was told by the religion department they gave her a copy of my short film to bring home. She sat down with her dad and watched it, and I was told, this is secondhand, but I was told his response was, "That's old news, Nike took care of that stuff." So misinformed, right? Now, you can say, oh, wouldn't it be great if LeBron would get on board? Iverson, pick one of them, right? Anybody recognize the music in the short film? Anybody know the band that was? Rage Against the Machine. Maybe you've heard of them. All right, I'm friends with Tom Morello, the guitarist. And the last time I was out at Tom's house, this was a number of years ago, we're sitting in the living room, and he gets hit up on his BlackBerry by Sheryl Crow. This is when she was dating Lance Armstrong. Hey, we're biking around your neighborhood. Are there any good trails here? So this is who he rolls with. I'm just trying to establish that, right? And I had asked Tom, you hang out with these people. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could get one of these big-time athletes or entertainers on board? And he said, absolutely. But don't wait for it. And it's never the people that are benefiting the most from the system that are going to stand up and lead the revolution. It's the dissidents. It's the workers. It's the disenfranchised. It's the people that Jesus hung out with. Right? People on the margins. I don't have access to any big-time athletes today. You know who I have access to? You. Send your email to Mark Parker. Get a t-shirt. Send your email to 3 friends at different colleges and have me get in their schools and do this presentation. Okay? We'll worry about Tiger Woods another day. Yes?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Tom. Great presentation. And I completely agree with everything you have here. One thing that concerns me is something like the Wisconsin and Cornell. Do you know what sporting equipment they went to? Is it like Adidas or something?
Yeah, it wasn't. Their thing wasn't so much like, okay, we're going to cut our contract with Nike and then we're going to run to Adidas. They wanted to make a statement with Nike. We tried to negotiate. Tried to negotiate with Nike for a year on that issue. Really? And they basically said, you have done nothing to make us believe that you were doing anything in good faith to address this situation. We told you what we were going to do if you didn't, so we're doing it. So a lot of times, and I'm not saying you're necessarily framing it like this, but if I sit down with people from like the athletic administration, the AD's office, their first question is, okay, if we don't wear Nike, what do we wear?
Well, yeah, that is.
Yeah, it's the wrong question to ask as a Catholic community. After seeing this presentation, it shouldn't be, well, what could we wear so we're not accused of supporting sweatshops? It should be, what can a Catholic institution with the leverage that Villanova has do to put pressure on Nike to walk in solidarity with those factory workers and get them the justice they deserve? It's a whole different way of looking at the issue.
Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
As a Catholic university, even a question is, if we're trying not to support any of this, but where can we turn that we're not supporting it? Because it seems as though it's...
Yeah. Right now, for high-end athletic gear, there's no company that I could say, go to this one. I'm working on that with Alta Gracia. One of the ideas that I floated with, I'm going to be meeting with their staff in D.C. this coming weekend, is coming up with a soccer uniform. I just want to start, let's get one sport and start populating Catholic schools with this soccer kit. So I don't know if they're going to be up for it. We'll see. And then we can kind of build it from there. In the meantime, don't advertise their products. There's a difference between, like, I have to wear something out of necessity. I had a game on Sunday, right? If you came see me play, I do not play nude, right? You would not come to my games if that was the case. So if you see me playing or training, or if I'm coaching, I was coaching last night, you will see no logos on me. Right? I wore a sweatsuit down here tonight. It's in my car. I changed before I started the presentation. I have patches from my old team that I put over the corporate logos. I have these American flag patches, Union-made American flag patches. I jokingly tell people I recapture these shorts in the name of democracy. Right? And I cover up with that corporate logo. Is it a compromise at the moment? Absolutely. Will we get to a point where hopefully in our lifetime a student would ask that question and somebody like me could be like, go to the mall tonight, here's 7 different companies, go for it? Yes. Here's why I believe that will happen. How many people here have eaten something organic in the last 3 months? Something organic. Raise the hands, keep them up. All right. If you asked that question, almost every hand went up. If you asked that question when I was a senior in high school at Christian Brothers Academy in 1989, one guy would have raised his hand. Matt McDougald, one of my best friends. And we used to go to Matt's house and be like, where does your mom buy this crap? You know, like seaweed chips and organic root beer. Now everybody is eating organic. If we go to any supermarket within a few miles of here, there's at least an aisle, if not an entire section of organic products. The green industry, it's a $30 billion a year industry that only existed as a tiny niche market a decade ago. How did that happen? Rachel Carson writes her book Silent Spring in 1963, launches the modern environmental movement. People got awakened to the issues. People like me started going out and talking about this stuff. Students like you started getting involved doing activism, demanding that products are being made with our values, and now you can go in any store and buy organic stuff. We'll get there with the clothes and shoes. I wish I had a more concrete answer for you right now.
So it's almost as if all we can do is make a statement right now because...
And that's huge.
Okay.
Could you imagine the statement that would be made if Villanova University said, our student athletes will no longer be walking billboards for transnational companies. We will buy stuff out of necessity, but every logo will be covered up with the patch that has the school seal on it. That's a huge statement.
Do you think they could do that? Put a seal on it?
Absolutely. Now, you're not going to get the money from Nike anymore.
Okay.
And who's the hoop coach now? I forget. Is it Majerus?
Jay Wright.
Who is it?
Jay Wright.
Okay. Oh, Jay Wright, yeah. His personal service agreement with Nike is probably going to go out the window as well. Tough. You're an employee at a Catholic university. We stand for something different. Deal with it. Okay, other questions, thoughts, or comments? Now's your chance. Even if it's something very critical, you won't hurt my feelings. There, we got 2 over there. We'll take those 2 and then we'll wrap, because I know we wanted to. And if you don't feel comfortable asking in front of the group, I'll stay here as long as you want me to, and while all of you are getting t-shirts, I'll answer more questions. Yep.
Hello, my name's Nathan. I really enjoyed the presentation.
Thanks, Nathan.
You mentioned about the advertising, and I'm wondering where kind of the large networks come into play here, because obviously like television networks are going to be doing most of the advertising, and especially ESPN, so I'd be wondering how they kind of fit into the picture.
Well, ESPN actually has done some of the hardest hitting reporting on this issue in the last 10 years. If you go back, and I think you can find it online there was a program done by ESPN, Outside the Lines, Nike in Vietnam, the American sneaker controversy, I think was the title of it. ESPN's done 3 different stories on me. You know, I've been on Outside the Lines. I've also been on HBO Sports. You know, they did a 15-minute piece, Nike Sweats was the title of that one. And if you go to teamsweat.org or the Facebook page, you can find those stories. So I think, you know, certainly those networks, you know, advertise Nike's products, and it would be great to have them be more critical, but we have to demand that. The networks are providing us with what they believe we want. So if that's the angle you want to take, you know, I could probably find, I think I still have his card, Jeremy Schaap, big reporter on ESPN. You want to start an email campaign to Jeremy Schaap for him to do another story on this issue? I'd be more than willing to share that with you, and we can see what happens. Okay? Somebody else? Yeah.
Hi. My question is, how do you get someone interested in this without an hour-and-a-half long presentation?
Yeah.
Like if we're just talking to our friends or talking to a professor, what do we do to spark someone's interest when they're not going to pay attention to you for a really long time?
Yeah, I think that and I'm not saying this like arrogantly, I worked collaboratively with a team to make that short film that you saw at the beginning. I think it's one of the best ways to get people interested. In part just because of my story. Like, I'm not the radical hippie activist that can be so easily dismissed. Right? Don't I look like I could be sitting in the boardroom in any one of these companies? And, you know, it's interesting now with the whole Occupy Wall Street movement. You should see if you want to be my friend on Facebook, just watching the exchanges on my wall with my buddies from corporate America is pretty entertaining. And, you know, I had this back and forth with two of them the other night. And they were saying, oh, those kids, they're just college dropout hippies. I said, you know what? I was there on Saturday and almost got arrested. I'm not. Deal with me. And I think I would encourage you, use my story, particularly with like student athletes, fraternity. Do we have any brothers from Lambda Chi Alpha here? Any of my brothers here, all right? You can tell the Lambda Chi guys, hello, brother. You know, this is one of your fraternity brothers that's doing this. You can talk to student athletes, and just because I think it's an easier way in. Another thing do you consider yourself an activist or just someone that's kind of in tune with these issues? Okay, one of the mistakes that student activists make a lot, and I've seen this, you know, where student activists will say, you say that athletes care and they'll get involved if they're just educated in this issue. We stood outside the athletic offices and we were just trying to hand them flyers and they wouldn't even look at us. What are we supposed to do then? I said, all right, tell me how many athletes you know by name. Because here's how I would approach it, right? What's your name? Nick. Let's say Nick was, on the basketball team. And I'd walk up into the cafeteria. Hey, you're on a basketball team, right? Sweet. You guys got a big game this weekend. Good luck. My name's Jim. It's nice to meet you. I just wanted to say I like watching you play. Good luck. Even if you don't like watching it, you can say that. And then the next time, Nick, how'd you guys do last night? I missed the game. I was working. How'd you do? We won. Awesome. Did you play?
A little bit.
Cool. Nice. Good luck in your next game. I hope to get there. Right? And then if you do get to a game, even if you don't like it, you go. I went to the first game. It was awesome. It was so cool. You guys are great. Blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm doing with Nick right now? I'm developing a relationship, and I'm not just seeing it as a target to gain for my campaign. Nick, you got 5 minutes? I just want to talk to you about something I'm working on. Now we've got a rapport, and we can sit down. And Nick might say, I don't care. Or Nick might go, hey, wow, I never thought of that before. And you know what? Yeah, there were like there were people, maybe they're from your group, they were standing outside of the basketball arena the other day, like handing out flyers. I feel bad, I walk past them, but I don't think they're aware of the fact, like, we're up to have practice at like 6 a.m., then we got another afternoon session, then I got to go in for physical therapy, I got a tutor that I got to meet with at 4, and then I got to be in the gym, and I was running late, and let me tell you something, you're late for one of coach's practices, game over. So I wasn't even trying to be rude, I just needed to get in the gym. And that might be where they're at. Having been a former Division I college athlete, that's the kind of stuff that they're dealing with. If you go to a fraternity president, using Lambda Chi Alpha as an example, don't we have to do 2 Fred sessions every semester, in theory, fraternity education sessions? Yeah. You could ask the president, hey, and let me tell you, the guys at the Kappa, I think, does that, if I remember correctly, they're always looking for programming. Could we come in and do a 15-minute presentation on, sweatshops and Villanova's university's role, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah, okay. And now you go in and you just present your information. Now when you start writing your editorials in the student newspaper about why you're really passionate about this, it's not the same 24 radical activists that are complaining about everything. Now the guys in the basketball team go, no, I know her. Man, she's pretty cool, and she seemed like she knew what she was talking about. Hey, she came in our fraternity meeting the other night, and everything sounded pretty rational to us. And that's how you start to build a movement. Always remember, what year are you here?
Senior.
Senior. Can you remember back, and might even been in high school or even middle school, when you were absolutely clueless on these issues as well? Reground yourself in that day whenever you approach somebody new to educate them about the issues. And have that loving compassion that it's you, the clueless one, sitting across the table. And you may have some more success in getting people interested in these issues. Now the reality is you might not. Then you know what you do? You do what Jesus said. You wipe the dust from your shoes and you move on to the next village. And don't get frustrated about it. Okay? All right. I want to thank all of you for staying as long as you did. We went over a little bit here. I want to close with this thought. All of you are at a great university. And I say that begrudgingly as a St. Joe's grad. Only 1% of the 7 billion people on the planet have a college education. 1%. That puts you in the global elite. Now, you may not feel elite when on Thursday and Friday, Saturday nights, you're jonesing for money for beer and pizza on the main line. But the fact that you'll eat 3 meals today if you want, you have somewhere safe to sleep tonight, you have clothes on your back, shoes on your feet, and you're getting an awesome college education, puts you so far ahead of the other 99% of the people on this planet that I would argue, and I hope you would agree with me, that you have a moral responsibility to use that education to not just benefit yourselves and go out there and make a ton of money when you graduate so you can live a comfortable life, but to take up the call that Jesus put forth to all of us, to follow him. And I don't mean Jesus, the Christ that sits up there and forgives my sins. I mean Jesus, the radical revolutionary that walked in the margins with the poor, the desperate, the dispossessed, whose good news was so scary to those in power that they falsely arrested him, beat him senseless, and hung him on a dump outside of the city as an example. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to take that call up, to go out these doors today, and maybe it's not sweatshops, maybe it's women's issues, maybe it's poverty, maybe it's homelessness, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's racism. Pick something. Unfortunately, there's enough injustice in the world that we could all have our own issue and work on it, but do that. And again, go out these doors, go back out into this Villanova community, and then later on out in the world, fighting to make a difference and leaving the world a better place than you found it. Thank you very much.